Hey guys, I'm going to start the Act III summary of Julius Caesar, and this is the start of Scene 1. So, the crowd of senators who were conspiring against Caesar and a bunch of people kind of hanging on, they surround Caesar just outside the Capitol, and then Decius, who we know is one of the traitors, offers a request from Trebonius to Caesar while Artemidorus tries to get his attention. So after a really vague interaction between Caesar and the soothsayer, Artemidorus pleads and begs Caesar to read his letter first, because it's the dearest to Caesar. The note tells Caesar of the plot and the names of the people who are conspiring against him. But Caesar says because he put the affairs of Rome before his own, that he was going to read Artemidorus' last. Artemidorus kind of presses him, and Caesar brushes him off and says, why is he mad, So before Caesar has the time to consider that he's making the biggest mistake of his life, he gets hustled into the Capitol by Cassius. And Cassius says that Caesar shouldn't give audience to everybody, every Roman in the street, because he needs to get to the Capitol. He needs to hurry up. So as Caesar enters the Capitol, Senator Popilius wishes Caesar good luck in today's enterprise. So naturally, the conspirators kind of flip out, and Popilius, who is chatting with Caesar, he seems like he knows about the plot. Brutus, who's really calm and collected, assures everyone, hey, you're just scaring yourselves, don't worry about it. And Popilius smiles with Caesar, who seems unconcerned, so he hasn't heard about the murder plot yet. So meanwhile, Trebonius is luring away Antony, so he can't do anything, and the plan starts to fall into place with that. Metellus is going to come up closer to Caesar, acting like he has a request of him, and then everyone's going to gather around to get ready to stab him. Cinna says that Casca is going to strike first. So they break, they kind of hustle out as Caesar calls the Senate to order. Metellus is the first to come before Caesar, and he begins to kneel, but Caesar stops him before he can, and pretentiously referring to himself, Caesar says stooping might appeal to a lesser man, but it won't sway him. And then he declares that Metellus' brother is going to remain banished. So no amount of begging and pleading is going to shake Caesar. It only makes him angry with the beggar. So Caesar and his arrogance definitely makes it harder to be sympathetic towards him at this point in the story. As Metellus is making his plea for his brother Publius, Brutus joins in and he kisses Caesar's hand, which really surprises Caesar, and then Cassius falls to Caesar's feet. So as Caesar gets surrounded, he declares that he's not going to change the law to accommodate Publius, and declares himself as constant as the North Star. And while every man might be a fiery star, all the stars move except the northern one. Caesar identifies with that star, so he's not about to change his mind. He's constant. That's what we're doing. So the conspirators, they keep pressing on him, and Caesar demands that they need to go away, and that their pleading is useless. It's as useless as trying to lift up Olympus, which in Greek and Roman mythology is the mountain of the gods. After all, so he hasn't even been swayed by his buddy Brutus, who's kneeling before him. So he's like, give up. So suddenly Casca rises to stab Caesar, and Brutus stabs him too. And then Caesar's last words are some of the most famous that you hear in literature. It's et tu, Brute, which means you too, Brutus, and then fall Caesar. It seems Caesar is willing to fall if his most noble friends betray him, like Brutus. So it's moving even after the whole most special star in the whole galaxy and everything. So immediately after Caesar falls, Cinna proclaims liberty, freedom, tyranny is dead, and then tells everybody to run and spread the message in the streets. Brutus realizes that all of the other folks standing around in the Capitol watching Caesar bleed might be a little bit shocked. He tells them to stay and relax as ambition's debt is paid, meaning that Caesar dying is the cost and consequence of his ambition. Casca directs Brutus and Cassius to the pulpit so they can address the crowd when Brutus notices that he can't find Publius anywhere. Cinna pointed out that Publius is looking shocked by the mutiny, and Metellus urges the conspirators to stand together in case Caesar's friends want to start a fight. Brutus then challenges everyone to come back to their senses. No one wants to hurt anybody, and he hopes no one wants to hurt them. So Brutus may be sensing that the plan to become heroes for killing Caesar has not come to pass, adds that the men who have done the deed and are going to bear the consequences of it. Trebonius enters to confirm the worst. Antony has run to his house, shocked by the act, and people are shrieking in the street like it's the end of the world, it's doomsday. And then Brutus basically says, we all know we'll die eventually, and life is just the process of waiting for the days to pass before it happens. So Cassius and Brutus go on to suggest that as Caesar's friends, they've done him a favor by shortening the period of time that he would spend worrying about death, which is kind of interesting logic. And weirdly, Cassius then calls everyone to bathe their hands up to their elbows in Caesar's blood and to cover their swords with it so they can walk out in the streets declaring peace, freedom, and liberty in the land. Which we should note, it is reminiscent of what Calpurnia's dream was. Cassius says he's sure that the bloodbath will go down in history as a noble act, and everyone agreed that Brutus should lead the procession to the street, as he has the boldest and best heart in Rome. Just then, Antony's servant enters, causing the marching band of all the bloody guys to just take pause. Antony has sent word with the servant to say Brutus is noble, wise, valiant, and honest, and further that he loves Brutus and honors him. Antony also feared, loved, and honored Caesar. So Antony pledges to love Brutus if he can get some assurance it's safe to come around for a visit sometime and hear the story of why Brutus thought it would be fine to kill Caesar. And basically, regardless of everything, he'll stay faithful to Brutus. Brutus tells Antony's servant that his master will be safe if he comes to the capital, and Brutus is glad they can all be friends again. Cassius, however, is still suspicious of Antony, and being, the expert in treachery, he's pretty right about spotting it at others. Antony shows up and makes a great show over Caesar's body, crying, wailing, weeping, everything. And he worries out loud for everybody to hear who else will be killed over some secret grudge that the conspirators might hold. And then Antony pleads with the conspirators to kill him right then and now if they wanted him be dead. They wanted him to die. Because to die by swords still fresh with Caesar's blood would be the greatest death ever, and which is pretty dramatic right there. Brutus pleads with Antony that though the conspirators' hands are bloody, their hearts are pitiful, and after all, somebody needed to do that terrible deed for Rome to drive out, basically to get rid of fire with fire. And he promises Antony that he'll only be met with love. But Brutus promises to soon explain why they've killed Caesar, but right now they need to go out and quiet the public, and there's a lot of frightened people who, that are out there. So Antony says he has no doubt that Brutus probably had some good reason to kill Caesar, and he shakes bloody hands with all the conspirators, and he looks at Caesar's corpse and begins a really long-winded speech that praises Caesar which is interesting because he's kind of betrayed Caesar by becoming loyal to the murderers. So Cassius interrupts this dramatic posturing and flat out asks Antony, well, are you with us or against us? And Antony says he was committed to the conspirators, but then he noticed Caesar's corpse again, still laying there dead, and the plan to be down with murderers kind of looks like, that's not as good. But still, Antony will remain their friend if they can provide some sort of reason for him to believe that Caesar was dangerous. Brutus promises that they can and that they must let him know. So Antony's only other little request is that he'd be allowed to take the body to the marketplace and to speak at Caesar's funeral. Brutus gives in to Antony's request, but Cassius kind of senses that this isn't right, and he pulls Brutus aside. He warns Brutus to bar Antony from speaking at Caesar's funeral because he's likely to say things that will incite people against them. Brutus decides he'll solve this problem by going to the pulpit first and explaining in a calm, rational manner the reasons for killing Caesar. And that he'll explain that the conspirators have given Antony permission to speak, and that Caesar will have all the lawful burial ceremonies. Brutus is certain that's going to win them a good look all around, and that people will be on their side. So just to make sure, Brutus makes Antony promise not to say anything crazy at Caesar's funeral. Instead of blaming the killers, he should speak of Caesar as a virtuous person and focus more on his life than his death. Antony promises, and he gets left alone to give a little speech, and he reveals that he is going to incite the crowd to murder the conspirators. And basically saying there will be so much blood and destruction that Caesar might show up from hell with a goddess of discord at his side, and mothers will smile to see their infants torn limb to limb. He's out for vengeance at this point. And then just then a servant arrives with the news that Octavius is on his way. Octavius is Julius Caesar's adopted son and heir. And Caesar had recently sent him a letter asking him to come to Rome, and he's now 7 leagues away. Antony tells the servant to hold Octavius where he is, as it's not safe for him in the city yet. He says Octavius should come after Antony has had a chance to give the speech and start the riots. So the servant lends Antony a hand and helps him carry Caesar's body out of the Capitol. All right, that's the end of scene 1. So now we got Act 3, scene 2. This starts with Brutus and Cassius hit the streets. They're surrounded by common people, and there's a lot of clamoring, and people want to hear them. And then Cassius takes one group, and the others stay to listen to Brutus. Brutus talks to the pulpit, and the crowd is silent. He delivers a really honest and simple speech. First, he tells people that they should trust his honor, which they know to be true, and he asks if anyone can say they love Caesar more than he did, and no one's able to. Brutus says that he rose against Caesar not because he didn't love him, but because he loved Rome more. And if Caesar were still living, they'd all be slaves. While Caesar was a lot of good things, he had to die for his ambition. To let him live would have been submitting to slavery, and that's un-Roman. So Brutus asks whether anyone who doesn't love Rome and freedom, and if there's anyone who doesn't love Rome and freedom, and no one raises their hand, no one answers. So obviously, in his reasoning, Caesar had to die. So everybody starts buying it, but then Antony shows up with Caesar's body, and Brutus introduces Antony to the crowd and closes his speech by restating that he killed his best friend for Rome's sake, and he'll turn the same dagger on himself if his country ever needs his death. Everyone's really happy with Brutus, and there are some calls to give him a statue among his ancestors and make him the new Caesar. They're kind of missing the whole democratic thing and trying to make him a king also. But Brutus dismisses himself and asks everyone to stay and listen to Antony speak. So the crowd is firmly behind Brutus, and they shout out that Caesar was a tyrant and Brutus has done them all a favor. And then Antony takes over with his famous speech beginning with, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I have come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them, and the good is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. So the crowd is sold. Antony manages to bring it around to the opinion that Caesar has been killed wrongfully, and he begins by insisting that Brutus and the other murderers are honorable, but then kind of undermines that statement by pointing out their main gripe against Caesar was his ambition, and how that couldn't be true. So Antony gives examples of how Caesar loved his people, bringing money to the country, weeping with poor, even refusing the crown 3 times, like at the beginning. He suggests that Caesar wasn't ambitious at all. He was devoted and loving to his citizens. So Antony uses the whole reverse psychology thing on the crowd and gets them to want to hear Caesar's will by insisting that they shouldn't hear it. He reads them the private document that gets sidetracked by mourning over Caesar's body. Again, Antony insists that Brutus is honorable. Then he points out the gash Brutus made in his friend's bloody body. Antony repeats this pattern over and over until all are in agreement to burn, slay, and otherwise do not cool things to Brutus and the other conspirators. So they're caught up and ready to go rioting when they forget about Caesar's will. Antony has to remind them that they wanted to hear it. After the mob gets the news that Caesar left them some nice gardens and 75 drachmas each, they decide to cremate Caesar in the holy place and burn down the traitors' houses with the same fire. As the mob sets off to carry out the chaos and killing, Antony delights that his plan has worked. He's pretty pumped about it. Then he gets news that Octavius has come to Rome with Lepidus. Both men are waiting for him at Caesar's house. So good fortune is upon them, as they will be the new triumvirate, basically a 3-man team that rules Rome. So we learn that Brutus and Cassius have fled the city, and that's the end of scene 2. They got out of there. And then in scene 3, the poet Cinna, who's traveling through the streets, gets caught up by the mob. They ask him a few questions, then confuse him with Cinna, the conspirator. And he tries to explain, no, you got the wrong guy, and the mob doesn't care, and they rip him to pieces because he has bad poetry. And as they drag him off stage, they list the names of the conspirators whose houses they're off to pillage and burn. And that's the end of scene 3. If you have any questions for your teachers, just make sure that you email them. And good luck. I hope to see y'all soon.